Have you ever pondered over which countries have the weakest armies in the world? In the intricate game of geopolitics, military strength often serves as the deciding factor. It's the invisible shield safeguarding sovereignty and the sword poised for defense. Yet, not all nations boast formidable forces. Some armies are less equipped, less trained, and perhaps less intimidating. But what makes this subject so fascinating? It's the intriguing blend of history, strategy, and human resilience. So, join us as we count down the world's weakest armies. Starting our countdown at number 5, we have the Caribbean nations. The Caribbean, an idyllic paradise known for its sun-kissed beaches and vibrant culture, also has a less glamorous side. When it comes to military strength, these island nations are up against quite a challenge. To understand why, we have to look at 3 key factors: resources, population size, and geopolitical influence. Firstly, resources. The Caribbean nations are not exactly overflowing with the kind of resources that can fuel a formidable military force. Their economies are primarily tourism-based, with little to no manufacturing or industrial sectors. This means they simply don't have the financial muscle to invest in advanced military technology or extensive personnel training. Secondly, population size. The Caribbean nations are by nature small. Their tiny populations don't leave much room for a large standing army. In fact, many of these nations don't have a standing army at all, instead relying on police forces for internal security and larger allies for defense against external threats. Lastly, geopolitical influence. The Caribbean nations don't carry a lot of weight on the global stage. They aren't major economic powers, they don't have significant strategic value, and they don't often find themselves at the center of international conflicts. This lack of influence means they have little need and even less incentive to develop strong military forces. All these factors combine to create a military conundrum for the Caribbean nations. They are peaceful, beautiful islands, with a relaxed lifestyle that doesn't lend itself to military might. But in a world where power often equates to strength, their lack of a strong military leaves them vulnerable. In the grand scheme of things, the Caribbean nations are a reminder that military power isn't everything. Their culture, their resilience, and their spirit are testaments to the fact that strength comes in many forms. But when it comes to conventional military strength, they have a long way to go. Despite their beauty and charm, these island nations struggle in the military arena. Moving along to number 4 on our list, we delve into the Oceanic region. Now, when you think of global military power, Oceania might not be the first region that comes to mind. This is largely due to its small, scattered countries, many of which are island nations with populations that barely break the 10,000 mark. Countries like Tuvalu and Nauru, for instance, are dwarfed not only in size, but in military prowess by their larger, more formidable counterparts. With a population of approximately 11,000, Tuvalu's military capabilities are understandably limited. It's a similar story with Nauru, which, despite being the 3rd smallest country in the world by area, boasts a population of just over 10,000. Limited resources play a significant role in these nations' military weaknesses. With economies largely dependent on subsistence farming and fishing, there's not a lot left over for military expenditure. And while some island nations may benefit from strategic locations, Tuvalu and Nauru lack this advantage. Nestled in the vast Pacific Ocean, they are isolated from major political hotspots. But don't let their small size fool you. These nations are rich in culture and history. Their people, while not armed with the latest military technology, are armed with a resilience and spirit that's been forged through centuries of survival in some of the planet's most challenging environments. So while their military might may not send shivers down the spines of larger countries, they hold their own in other ways. They are a testament to the fact that strength can come in many forms, not just in the size of an army or the firepower it wields. These small island nations, while rich in culture, lack the military might of larger countries. But as we continue our journey through the world's weakest armies, remember this: military strength is just one way of measuring a nation's power. There's so much more to a country than its ability to wage war. Next on our list at number 3, we journey to the African continent. Known for its rich culture, diverse ecosystems, and plentiful resources, Africa is also home to some of the world's most hard-pressed militaries. 2 such nations in particular highlight this paradox: Somalia and the Central African Republic. Somalia, located in the Horn of Africa, has faced decades of internal conflict, leading to a fractured military structure. The nation's army has had to contend with not only external threats, but also internal ones, such as insurgent groups and pirates. Coupled with the lack of adequate resources and training, these factors significantly undermine the strength of Somalia's military. Similarly, the Central African Republic, despite its abundant mineral resources, grapples with a weak military structure. The nation has been embroiled in an ongoing internal conflict since 2013, which has severely impacted its military capabilities. The lack of a stable government and the constant power struggle have led to a military that is often caught in the crossfire rather than being a cohesive force. Furthermore, the poor infrastructure in these nations further exacerbates these issues. Inadequate road networks and communication systems hinder effective coordination and rapid response, which are crucial in any military operation. The lack of such basic facilities not only weakens the military's operational capabilities, but also poses significant logistical challenges. However, it's important to remember that these military weaknesses are not a reflection of the people or the potential of these nations. Both Somalia and the Central African Republic are rich in resources and cultural heritage, and with the right support and stability, their militaries could become a force to be reckoned with. In conclusion, while the military weaknesses in these African nations are significant, they are not insurmountable. With the right investment, training, and infrastructure development, these nations could turn the tide and strengthen their military capabilities. Despite their rich resources and cultural heritage, these nations face significant military challenges. Taking the second spot on our list, we travel to the heart of Europe. We find ourselves in the picturesque landscapes of Andorra and Liechtenstein, nations renowned for their tranquility and serenity. But beneath the peaceful facade, these nations grapple with a different kind of challenge, a lack of military strength. Let's begin with Andorra, a country nestled between Spain and France. It's a nation known for its ski resorts and duty-free shopping, but not for its military prowess. With a population of just over 75,000 people, Andorra doesn't have a standing army. Instead, it relies heavily on its police force for internal security, and counts on its neighbors, Spain and France, for external protection. Quite the paradox, isn't it? A nation without a military, in the heart of a continent that's seen some of the world's most brutal wars. Now, let's voyage to Liechtenstein, a tiny principality tucked between Austria and Switzerland. With a population of around 38,000 people, it's smaller than most cities in the world. Liechtenstein abolished its army back in the 19th century after deciding it was too costly. Today, it's one of the few countries in the world without a military, relying instead on its police force and the protection of neighboring Switzerland. Andorra and Liechtenstein, though small and peaceful, serve as a stark reminder of the different paths nations can take. Both countries have decided to forego military strength, instead investing their resources in their people and infrastructure. They've chosen to rely on diplomacy, international conventions, and the goodwill of their neighbors for their security. While these nations may not have the most formidable armies, they possess something perhaps even more powerful: the courage to stand by their principles, even in a world often dominated by military might. They remind us that strength can be found not just in numbers, but also in the power of peace and diplomacy. Indeed, these peaceful nations prioritize diplomacy over military might. They are the European Enigma, a testament to the power of peaceful coexistence. Finally, at the top spot on our list, we find ourselves in Asia. Nestled between powerhouses like China and India, we have the tranquil kingdom of Bhutan. Now you might be wondering, what could possibly put this nation at the top spot of our list? Well, it's not the lack of firepower or military prowess, but rather a unique philosophy that governs this nation. Bhutan's approach to national prosperity is unlike any other. Instead of focusing on military strength or economic growth, Bhutan concentrates on something called gross national happiness. Yes, you heard it right, happiness. This small nation believes that the well-being and contentment of its people are the true measures of national success. Now, don't get me wrong, Bhutan does have an army, albeit a small one. With a population of just over 800,000, it's no surprise that their military force is proportionally small. But size isn't the sole determinant of strength, is it? Well, in Bhutan's case, it's not just about the size. The nation enjoys peaceful relationships with its neighbors. It's not embroiled in any major conflicts or territorial disputes, which further reduces the need for a large, powerful military. Bhutan's emphasis on peace, happiness, and tranquility over military might is what puts it at the top of our list. This peaceful nation holds the title for the weakest army in the world. To wrap it up, let's revisit our list of the world's weakest armies. We've journeyed through the globe, starting with the Caribbean Conundrum, where a lack of resources and small population size have led to a less formidable military. Then we ventured to the Oceanic Outliers, where geographical isolation has resulted in a military more focused on disaster response than warfare. The African Anomaly followed, a region where political instability and corruption undermine military effectiveness. Next, we explored the European Enigma, a case of powerful nations choosing to rely more on diplomacy than armed forces. Finally, we arrived at the Asian Astonishment, where a peaceful ideology and reliance on alliances have resulted in a modest military presence. Despite their military weaknesses, these nations each hold unique charms and strengths, reminding us that there's more to a country than its military might.